In conversation with some fascinating ladies who've changed the game in the world of video, music, and gaming. Only on Hungama's Women Game Changers podcast.
Hi, welcome to Hungama celebration of the 50 Game Changers 2024. Over this season, you will get to know women who are chalking their own path and paving the way for the multitudes to follow in the field of entertainment across music, video, and gaming. I'm Raunaq Roy from Hungama, and it is my pleasure to welcome the game changer Riya Mukherjee, a radio veteran with nearly 3 decades of experience in the audio entertainment industry, which is always interesting, especially to see women planting their flag here. Riya advises streaming platforms, apps, websites, radio stations, agencies, you name it, India, internationally, on creating and curating content in the music and entertainment space. She's also a podcasting trainer, script and voice coach. So I think, Riya, at the end of this, I'm going to take some tips from you. She also started RMWP, where she wrote and produced her first short film, The Disguise, that was very highly critically acclaimed. RMWP is an audio and sometimes video content producing company with the vision of creating differentiated entertainment podcasts. Welcome, Riya. Thank you for taking the time to share the knowledge and shorten the learning curve.
Thank you so much. It is so strange for me to be on the other side because most of the times I'm doing what you're doing right now.
I can imagine, and I have to say that so much of the content that you create is interesting and engaging, and I think, in a space which is very quickly getting crowded with an anything goes kind of space, I think, Riya, you've been able to really stick to the fact that you're creating content that matters. So I'd like you to start by telling us a little bit about your journey, getting in, getting accepted, and getting ahead.
My God, how much time do you have? I'm a very old woman. When I tell people I started working in radio in the 90s, most of them are like, there was radio in the 90s? I mean, aside from All India Radio. And I have to say, yes, the Times of India group had this vision of leasing 8 to 9 hours on the All India radio frequency. Right. And it was called Times FM. So yes. It was a bizarre experience for listeners because there was the traditional bhaiyo aur behno aapse mukhatib hu main kind of radio happening before and after those 9 hours, when it would have this complete personality change to Times FM, something completely different, and then go right back to the kind of radio that was happening all over the country otherwise. Yeah. And I sort of cut my teeth on, I stumbled into that job quite by accident. I had just finished my graduation in literature from Hindu College, and I was getting restless. I walked into the Times of India building with the idea that I want to be a journalist. But I walked out 4 hours later with the job of a copywriter in the radio division, this Times FM radio division, right, for the princely salary of 1,500 rupees a month.
Mm-hmm. And I started our jobs in the 90s. Know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, right. And I used to be a radio listener even before that because I loved music. There was a lot of music in my home and popular music, so radio was a good place for that. And I fell headlong in love with radio, and that love affair continues 30 years later.
That's incredible. And interestingly, we're having this conversation at a time when audio is really coming of age.
Yes, in good and bad ways.
Okay, why don't you tell us more about that?
So see, the medium has changed. I quit full-time radio 10 years ago, 2014. I was the national creative director at Radio Mirchi. I had many portfolios under me, right. Programming being just one of them.
Right.
But something was making me restless. Something was making me feel like it's time to move on. And I myself could not believe I was feeling like that because I was very passionate about radio. So I couldn't believe that at the end of about 20 years then, I wanted to move out. But I was getting restless and I moved, and one of my first clients was Ghana, which is a sister company
Yes.
in this group company. I continued to be a consultant for Mirchi as well. Now people think I did something with a lot of foresight, like I made the switch to digital.
Right.
And I continued to reskill, etc., and how amazingly visionary that was, etc. But I must tell you, Raunaq, I was just bored. I had made no such great career plans that I must transition to digital. It was all just fortuitous. And of course, my CEO of that time, Mr. Pandey, said, look, creative people process data like this. You guys have instincts. You do not look at charts the way we guys do.
Right.
But you were processing data, but just the way a creative person does.
So I understand exactly what you mean. In 2009, when I made the switch from print to digital,
right,
digital was still this, ugly stepchild of most print publications.
Right.
Because the sort of afterthought, one paragraph of content also going on digital.
Exactly, right.
There would be two guys sitting in one corner, for most magazines and newspapers. Once you made the transition to digital, you realized you can't really go back.
Correct. Because, see, the delivery medium is changing. It's about hardware.
Right.
How many homes have a radio set today? How many cars come fitted with an FM receiver anymore? How many phones have FM receivers anymore? The experience of hearing someone talk to me like a friend, with or without songs, is an eternal experience. That's never going to go away.
Right.
But, where are the radio sets anymore? Also, the generation brought up on digital does not understand the concept of linear advertising. They keep looking for the proverbial red cross, So to give linear advertising with no option to, skip it at a price, maybe take a subscription. But this whole thing of there is linear advertising and you have to stay with it is something the new generations are not at all okay with.
No, I also think that, the ability to change channels or your choice of content with the ability to know what you're going to get, as opposed to going from 107 to 102, but still not knowing.
Yeah, and I'm at the mercy of the presenter, and of course, most people think the presenters select the songs. That's very far from the truth. But anyway, at the mercy of the presenter or the music curator, and not knowing whether I'll land into an ad or a promo or an RJ talking about something I'm not interested in. What digital has done is it has given us deep niches. So when I do my retro podcast today, and a lot of people have said that why don't you put it on the radio as well? Because you do have a relationship with Mirchi, and Ghana is now owned by Mirchi. But, I say no, every radio logic has been turned on its head for the podcast. For the simple reason that if you're coming into a retro podcast, you are choosing it. It is not happening in the environment where I have to make sure I'm catering to everybody, which is the radio logic. That I must
George Costanza because it's on TV.
Yeah, exactly. So, my podcast could never be on the radio because I am not playing you the most popular hits, because I'm catering to an audience that is choosing to deep dive into old Hindi films.
Correct, because it's sliced up the interests so minutely that you really do know what you're getting into when you choose a channel as a consumer, but also as a content creator. I think you're also very clear on who is logging.
Who is your audience? What do they want? If I played only the popular radio hits on my podcast, my listeners would get disappointed because they are so well versed that they're introducing me to music very often. So, digital is very different. And it's been an interesting transition. The reason I said bad at the beginning of this question was because audio in digital hasn't cracked the business model. It's not making money. And at the end of the day, for it to remain viable and vibrant, it needs to crack the business model. Now, that's not in the hands of creative people like us, but we can see the fallout. When platforms are no longer commissioning podcasts, when they're not willing to spend on production, when they're opening up their streaming platform like YouTube to say, come, put your content, and then Bhagwan Malik. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, but we don't have the funds to back it. These are all signs of, the commercial struggles.
Yes, that's true. I think that's also coming from the problem of plenty. And I think we saw this in video also for a bit. Because the entry barriers to creating your own podcast have come down so much that everybody's got one. And now you've got to try and figure out what's working, what's not working, what's on a platform with a streaming subscription may not be as exciting as what's free on YouTube, because it's a conversation between, Sam Altman and Bill Gates, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but what I also see is that we're seeing some really great quality content starting to take the reverse order. You used to have video shows on TV or on film, and then those would become derivatives of those would be seen on radio. Today,
Yes.
like even at the Hangama Originals, yesterday I was told that we have 2 or 3 shows on the floors that have actually gone from the audio podcast as a series of stories to now going to be created in the video format. So, I hope that we will see, a better quality of, I think, the ability to kind of discern. I think curation is going to start becoming a lot more important, the same way that it did in music streaming.
Yes, absolutely. And see, in the West, this has happened several times with great success. I mean, Serial being at the foremost of the podcast that became a great TV show. Serial, I think, started the whole trend. Ricky Gervais's show, and there's so many of them that just went from podcast to television. And I think that is the way to go. We have done some great work in the podcasting space in India, but we have also made some huge mistakes. I don't think this is the space for me to start ranting about the mistakes, but
Okay, no, instead, why don't you tell us, Riya, what are inherent traits, in you that you feel makes you exceptional and intuitive when it comes to radio and media and broadcast in general?
Oh, exceptional. My God, I don't think of myself in those terms. But see, I'm a writer. I am a concept and script person. And from there, I convert ideas into the audio space. So I think over the years, I have acquired a specific expertise in writing for the spoken word, which is why when I tell people that my career has pivoted into writing dub scripts and lyrics, and they say, oh, what a transition, I say it's not really a transition, not for me, because it is still audio for me. I'm not thinking of the visuals. I'm not thinking about Ramcharan and Tarak's dance in Naatu Naatu. I mean, what it became, but when I was writing the song, I wasn't thinking about that. I have always focused on writing for the spoken, or in this case, now that I'm also a lyricist, the written, the sung word.
Yeah.
And I think I have a specific instinct for the sound of language, which is why writing dub scripts for South films also works for me. Because very often a dubbed film sounds very dubby, as I call it. But I think what I have the ability to do is, because you're translating a dialogue, you're transposing the cultural cues, which very often don't work.
Other than just writing, in the first format, because that is coming from, your own experience and emotion. Here you are also trying to carry experience and emotion while you are also translating for interpretation and meaning.
Yes, and then there is the lip sync, because it's already all been shot in Tamil or Telugu already.
Right.
And after that, you need to step back and say, okay, I've got the lip sync, I've got the meaning, I've translated it, But then you say, oh, but does anybody talk like that? And that's where a lot of dub writers don't do that last check to say, okay, who talks like this? And if people don't talk like that, then even though you've managed your sync and length and duration and everything, you have to go back and rewrite it. Because at the end of the day, it has to sound the way people talk.
That's such an interesting way of looking at a word. Riya, tell me, so from that copywriter who went in thinking she was going to be a journalist, how did you earn your chops? And, in these 30 years, and, you clearly have a very strong practiced ease in the way you handle the format, but also now in your own, grasp and skill over the space. Do you feel like it took you longer because you had the distinction of being a woman?
No. You know something, I have had the tremendous good fortune to work in a whole lot of companies which were what I call not beyond gender sensitive. They were gender neutral in the truest sense of the word, in the sense they did not disregard gender where it mattered, like things like maternity leave, etc. But for the rest of it, it was not a factor. Not in Radio Mirchi for sure. And even before that, when I worked in an event company for 3 years, Roshan Abbas's event company. It was a boys' locker room. Guys didn't know how to handle themselves around women because it was a bunch of guys in shorts who had started that event company. And events are done by men, especially in the 90s. But while it was a boys' locker room and there was a lot of sexist jokes, as happens in the 90s and all, it didn't come in the way of your growth, or the pressure that was put on you, or the demands that were made of you professionally, which was great. There was nobody saying, oh, you can't go for that set construction at 1 a.m. And this was Delhi in the 90s. But our bosses expected us to be there, and that was a great thing. As far as Mirchi is concerned, I mean, all senior management have been women, There was simply no distinction, not in terms of the challenges that were thrown at you, not in terms of the growth that was given to you. Not in terms of your salaries, nothing. I have faced gender discrimination after quitting Mirchi in my life as a freelancer. And I used to tell my bosses, my ex-bosses in Mirchi, that you guys have spoiled me because I'm not used to this. And I'm realizing this is the rest of the world.
Right. Because, for example, a lot of the women that I've spoken to, even on the music side, gatekeeping is a real thing. But not just from a point of view of gatekeeping, I think also from a view of the fact that it's 6 people in a room making decisions. And sometimes you're not in the instant recall of any of those 6.
Right. Well, like I said, most of my career, for the first 22 years, I didn't face that. Once I stepped out and I became a freelancer, it took me a long time to understand that a pitch not working out or me not getting the money I wanted was because of gender, because it would not strike me. I had not faced it, not in terms of my raises, not in terms of my responsibilities, not in terms of my promotions. So I'd walk away dejected saying, okay, I didn't land this pitch, or I didn't get this approved, or I didn't get the money I wanted. And a friend of mine who's very senior in HR started pointing it out to me, saying, you do realize that you being a woman has a role to play in this. You do realize. And I was like, oh my God, it had never struck me. So since 2014 to now, for sure, I have faced it at the fag end of my career rather at the beginning, because your question was about earning my chops. Earning my chops was not a problem. But now I have realized how bad it is in the big bad world out there, from which I was insulated for the first 20-25 years of my career, surprisingly.
Your seniority. And this is with your seniority.
Yes. This is with my seniority, with all the, you know how it is. We are aggressive, we are not assertive.
Yeah.
We are tantrumy, we are not particular. There are all those, especially I must say, more than audio. See, my podcasting work was with companies like Audible and Spotify. There's no question of all this there. There's, there I faced nothing. The space I faced this most in is film work.
Yes.
That's stuck in a different century. And, as you know, a lot of these films are hyper-masculine films anyway. And very often, I am working in a film where I'm the only woman in the room and there are like 50 men floating around that studio space and I'm probably the only woman. That has also happened. I have also had an opportunity to work with some excellent women in this space. But yeah, there is definitely more than, how do I put this? There are stereotypes.
I think while we are seeing more and more women get into the non-front of camera aspect of film, I think we're just not seeing them in the numbers that we would like. I think I was talking to Priya Seth a while back, and I remember her telling me that there were 103 or 104 registered cinematographers in the whole country.
Right.
That covers all aspects of entertainment. So that's Bollywood, that's Tamil, Telugu. That's a very, very small number.
It's a very small number, yeah.
It's something that I, just carried around. How do you work around it, Riya? Because it's a reality, but you do have to, at some point you have to acknowledge it and then find ways to work around it. How do you do that?
It's like this. Some time back, a friend, and all my friends are friends, they're my age, right? We have our ongoing jokes and we have our ongoing conversations, and I'm digressing into a personal anecdote for like 1 minute, and then I will come back to your more pertinent professional question. So a very, very close friend of mine, friend from my school days, was once again on the phone, and I was a little upset about something, and he said, "Arey Kali Ma" or something, and I just paused and I said, that joke is beyond its sell-by date. It's enough. To say a woman who speaks her mind is a Chandi or a Kali. I said, it's done. I've been hearing this through my teenage years and my 20s and 30s. It stopped being funny some time ago, and now I'm done with it. And of course, this friend, being a very close friend of mine, has never repeated it. But the reason I told you this story is this is the perception with which men receive me in these film spaces. Aggressive, Kalima, Chandima, Bachke Raho, those are the jokes that are constantly doing the rounds. Because if I say that, no, we don't speak Hindi like this. So I understand you're from Hyderabad, so you have a little Hindi of your own because of Dakhni Urdu. But trust me, when you release this film pan-India, this phrase will not sound right.
Right.
That becomes, my God, she pushes back so much.
Inconvenient.
And I'm like, my God, this is pushback. You haven't even seen my pushback yet. This is conversation in my mind, because you've brought me here to be a Hindi expert, right?
So, but I also see a lot of people, and I'm seeing this more in the last decade than I did before. More and more people are given to monologues. They don't realize that this is a dialogue. You're going to talk, then I'm going to talk back, and it's not an argument.
It is a conversation, yes. It's a discussion.
Correct. Okay.
There was a particular film where there was a dubbing supervisor who had perpetually got a scowl on his face. Really, really resting scowl face. Yeah. And at one point he said something, and he insisted that we do the Hindi that particular way. And I just looked at him and I was nodding, because I was genuinely thinking, like, how do I find a bridge between correct Hindi and what he's saying? And my face, I know, was blank. It wasn't scowling or frowning at all. And he suddenly threw up his hands and he said, and the studio engineer and an assistant director was standing there, and he said, "My God, just look at your face." And I looked at him and I said, "I can't believe you just said this. Have you seen your face?" And everybody burst out laughing.
Oh, good for you, yeah. And I'm good on them also for laughing.
Yes, because I think, I read a wonderful meme the other day which said men don't know how to deal with women who do not have their customer service face on. And that is so true. You can sit there with the grumpiest, scowliest expression, but I'm not even allowed to have a blank face, because I should have an ingratiating smile on my face at all points, because I have to have my customer service face on.
You know what's interesting to me while you were saying that is you were saying resting, and then you thought about it, you came to scowl face. The reality is there isn't a male version of resting bitch face, is there?
And I was not going to say resting bitch face at all. I find that so derogatory.
Correct. But my point is, it's so easily come into conversation or a vocabulary, that phrase, but there isn't a male counterpart for it.
There is no male counterpart for so many of these. What's the male word for slut? What's the male word for nymphomaniac? It's crazy how gendered language is.
That's true. Like I said, I'd love to know recommendations on how some of the youngsters can work around some of these issues, because they're not going to disappear. They haven't disappeared in 30 years. They're not disappearing in the presence of seniority. So, if there are ways or tricks that you figured out that are just easier to work around, or then people that are easier to work with. Shout out to the allies as well. People.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to the allies. And if there are no allies, then one of the ways that has worked for me completely and the best way is to pretend I'm gender blind, And sometimes when somebody is saying something in a good or a bad way, which has a gender color to it, like, would you like to come to the studio at 2 a.m. or would that be difficult for you, etc. I look blank, like, why are you asking me this? I push them to say, oh, because you're a woman. And then I say, are you going to create an unsafe environment for me? Should I be worried? No, of course not. We'll make sure. I said, so then why the question? So a lot of times I blank out when these things happen, because otherwise I'd be fighting all the time. And if I'm fighting all the time, then when am I working? So, I expect the same treatment in terms of respect, in terms of space. And I have mastered, because I used to be more assertive. I used to be more, I used to flare up, etc. But that wasn't great for my mental health, and it wasn't great for the project. Yeah, so what has worked for me is to go in with the assumption that we are all equal, and talk and work with the assumption that we are all equal. And if anybody says anything differently, to almost look surprised.
So you mentioned, Riya, that, you are assertive and expect that, gender blind or gender neutral behavior and treatment. You also mentioned pay. Do you believe that you have been able to climb that mountain?
No. The kind of money that's offered to me, I can give it to you in writing. If a man had written the Hindi dialogues for RRR, if a man had written the Hindi version of Naatu Naatu, if a man had written Salar, if a man had written Kalki, they wouldn't dare offer the money they offer me. They wouldn't dare. A man would be strutting around with these like blooms coming out of a hat.
Right.
To call me an outsider even today, simply because I don't live in Bombay and I don't hobnob with the Bollywood crowd, because I am primarily from the audio industry. But to have the gall to call me an outsider simply because I'm not from Aramnagar is preposterous. To offer me the kind of money that they offer me, I don't think if there was a man who had done the work I have done in the last 7-8 years, they would have dared to offer that money.
I hope that's one mountain that gets somewhat rationalized in our generation. That's the one, I believe it's an easy mountain to climb if you just see that work is gender agnostic.
Yeah, and honestly, look at these films. None of them are what they call the sensitive feminine films, which itself is such an irritating bracket. But these are all very macho films. So, I have the ability to push back and climb that mountain slowly because I have other sources of income, because I am from another industry. But suppose this was my livelihood only, what would I do? I say no, and then they come back and they agree to my terms or almost my terms. But what if I didn't have the ability to say no?
Yes, that's true. To which I'm actually going to bring my next question, which is going to be, about some of this and some of the work that you're doing in terms of, the production and curation of content. How do you navigate the balance between your creative and commercial needs and requirements?
With great difficulty. So, my podcast, where I do my Hindi Retro podcast, which is almost like a radio show in the digital space, is pure soul work. It had stopped for 2 years in the middle, and it was a very distressing time for me, not because of the money. There's no money in podcasting, actually. But it's something I do purely for my soul and for my love for this cinema and these songs. I started getting a lot of these South films. That's more for the money.
Right.
From a sensibility point of view, I personally am more the Shujit Sarkar kind of films. So obviously you can see from a sensibility point of view, I'm very far away from most of these films. But I try and give it a creative spin of a different kind. Like I tell myself that I will not enjoy this if I tell myself I'm only doing it for the money. So let me challenge myself creatively in another way.
Exactly, I think the crux of the question also, because at the end of the day, you even keeping your commercial sort of parameters in mind, it's still a creative process. You still have to get excited and curious about it.
Yes. And there are 100 ways to get excited about it. It doesn't all have to be about your sensibility.
Right.
You know, one of the ways to do it is to say, forget sensibility, focus on honing your craft. Like, you know, if you are an understated person, how dramatic can you get? So when I was writing for RRR, I would think I'm writing my most dramatic dialogues. But Rajamouli sir would come and say, is Hindi more understated? Why am I not getting that flair of Telugu? So I'd be like, no, Hindi has a lot of flair. It's me. Let me try again. And I would have to channel my inner Salim Javed and remember all those wonderful, Amitabh Bachchan movies with those dialogues, which were so over the top and yet so believable. So I said, let me forget about being understated, or let me forget about the kind of realistic cinema I like. I've enjoyed those Bachchan movies. So let me remind myself of those. मैं आज भी फेंके हुए पैसे नहीं लेता. I said, come on, there's nothing realistic about that. But we love it. So you can give yourself creative challenges in terms of the craft. If you don't relate to the art, you can still challenge yourself in terms of the craft and get really excited about that.
Okay. One thing that I noticed, I was chatting with a niece of mine actually a couple of months back, and she was actually about a year back first, and a year back she told me, I said, what do you want to do? And she said, I want to explore voice and audio. So I said, what do you mean? She said, I want to be a voice artist. And one year later, a couple of months back, she wants to do chemistry. I'm assuming at some point you have, that sense of what will I do with it and how do I go about it starts to also, I think if you're not from the space, you don't really know how you can, figure this out. So what advice would you give to aspiring young women who want to explore the audio side of entertainment?
I would say that if you want to earn from it, then you need to look at becoming a dubbing artist, because that's the only paying aspect of audio right now. RJing is limited because every radio station in every city has only 3 live RJs today and maybe 2 recorded RJs who are doing syndicated shows across the network. So locally speaking, if you have 4 or 5 radio stations, main radio stations in your city, each has about 3 live jocks Monday to Friday. So you're looking at 15 jobs for the entire city. And most of the RJs who are there for years. There's a tremendous shelf life to a radio presenter because it's pure audio. They don't have to worry about hair, makeup, costume, fitness, all that. And they develop an audience, and the audience loves them and loves coming back to them. So they're not going anywhere in a hurry. So as far as radio voice is concerned, like I said, in a big metro, there are 15 jobs in total. So good luck to landing one of those 15. Dubbing is one place where there is a lot of money to be made, and it is a skill that everybody needs nowadays because of the way films are going pan-India now. Hindi films, Tamil films, Telugu films. So there's a lot of work in the dubbing space. Hollywood, South films, regional films. So yeah, that's the one place where audio is making money. And of course, you can have your own podcast as long as you're not looking at it becoming a source of income. But it's a great way to hone your voice skills for sure.
You mentioned dubbing extensively, and I see that, yes, it's, it's also a way to pay your bills. It's also a need that is constant and only growing currently. But we are also at the cusp of AI infiltrating many parts of entertainment. You believe that audio is also going to be one of those areas where you will see some amount of transitioning to AI for dubbing, or?
But it's already happened. Prabhas's regular dub artist was not used in Kalki. Some other artist was used and AI was used to match his voice. So it's happening. They're still using human beings to do the dub and AI to match the voice. I don't know if AI will start doing all of it, but obviously that's not something we can prevent from happening. But today I was reading in the papers that Sonu Nigam said something very pertinent. He said, average singers need to worry about AI. AI will come and eat up the average guys very quickly. It'll take longer to eat up the exception.
Right, that's very pertinent, and it sounds also like Sonu.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you can bring something exceptional to the human talent you bring to the table,
Right.
then AI will take a little longer to replace you.
I think that's true, and I think Sonu, with his skill, has the chops to be able to make that statement and know that he is, in that sense, protected, not only because what he can bring to a song is, very unique to him.
Exactly.
But then take that to a live performance and experience. So you're right. Tell me, Riya, does imposter syndrome still become a thing? I mean, you're very confident. You have great leadership in the space you inhabit. But does imposter syndrome still become a thing?
I will sound arrogant, but I must say no. And this is something the more I grow and the more I talk to other women, the more female or centric podcasts I've done, like Mind, Body, Money, where I spoke about mental, physical, and financial fitness for women.
Right.
I realize women, especially in South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, are raised with two huge ingredients which were completely absent from my childhood: guilt and shame. And every day as I grow older, I've lost both my parents now over time. The number of thanks I send up to them for raising me with
a lovely legacy for them to give you.
The toxicity of guilt and shame being absent from my childhood has shaped who I am. And I have repeatedly said this on social media, on my podcast, that I am as grateful to my parents for what they did not say as what they did say.
Right.
Log kya kahenge? They never said. Think about the honor of the family? They never said. How could you talk like that? They never said. Why did you question this? They never said. I am so eternally grateful to my amazing parents for not saying some things which I didn't even realize was so ubiquitous in the upbringing of a girl.
Yeah.
And it makes me the shameless person I am.
I'm hoping that we are all bringing up a generation of shameless girls, because really, like, one of the things that I tell, I have a teenage daughter. She's at the end of her teens now. And the one thing I tell her is the worst phrase in the English language or in all language is the good girl.
Oh,
because
God.
Yes. No such thing as a good girl. A good girl is only a girl who's been trained not to do things that would actually bring her a lot of satisfaction and joy, whether it's physical or it's financial or it's just in terms of leadership.
Yes, absolutely. And to be able to raise girls the way I was raised, where there was no filter of your speech, actions, behavior must please someone.
Or subscribe. I mean, you talked about honor, and when I was growing up, I grew up in what was for in my mind a very progressive family. But there was a sentence that till today I feel is the one thing that my parents said to me that really upsets me even now is the Malhotra girls don't do this.
Oh, right.
Oh my God! And I was just like, why? Why are we not doing this?
Like, my dad, the other day, my housekeeper, who's like my soul sister, she's been with me for 15 years. And she was asking me that, was your father conservative? So I thought for a second and I said, no, he was protective. She said, isn't that the same thing? I said, not at all. Right. Not once was I told it all hinges on me and my behavior. He said, there are idiots out there, and this is India. This is Delhi in the 80s and 90s. So just take care and be safe. It wasn't, why are you wearing this? You are shameless. It was, be careful, they are shameless. So from the word get go, I was told it's not my fault, and that perspective really helped me. Or I remember, I'm sharing these stories because I'm assuming a lot of women who will be listening to this are also mothers. I had done something naughty. I must have been 6. My mother was doing the regular, tumhare umar mein, at your age, we did this, we did that, whatever. Maybe I was 7. And I was looking at her and I was rocking back and forth. And I said, but why do I have to be the way you were? Any other mother would have landed one jab.
Correct.
She paused. She looked at me. She pressed my cheeks and said, you're absolutely right. You don't have to be the way I was. and I shouldn't be saying this to you. What you did, this specific thing was naughty and it's ideally not done. But you're absolutely right. You don't at all have to be the way I was or at any age. And she told my dad when he came from office as a good thing. And dad said, yes, why does she have to be like either of us?
I remember I was actually, now when I think about it, in so many ways, it was like, I come from a family of a lot of sisters. I have cousin sisters. My sister and I were the first ones who went out and worked. And my cousins are so highly educated, brilliant women. And then a couple of them went on to work, years after they'd had once the kids were growing up, that kind of thing, went on to do exceptional things also. But we were the first ones as youngsters to work, and then I had a baby and I worked through this. And I remember, even then thinking that there was no expectation in terms of gendered roles that I ever sort of wanted for myself, or even my father wanted for me. It wasn't like, they must learn how to cook and they must learn how to keep house and things like that. As a life skill, you should be able to make yourself, feed yourself at some point kind of thing.
Right.
And, growing up as a parent, it was one of those things that I felt compelled to constantly keep saying, which was, you don't owe me anything except, to keep yourself safe when I'm not around kind of thing. Other than that, you don't owe me dressing in a certain way. You don't owe me good grades. You don't owe me, you're allowed to kind of live your life in whatever way you also choose to do it. And I think more and more, we do need to, work out exactly like you said, the shame and guilt that comes inherently into, a lot of lives of a lot of women. That I was at the Apple offices and I was on a panel just a couple of months back. And, one of the women stood up and said, you talked about, somebody else in the panel had talked about, not sort of giving into the guilt and, because it's tough whether you're an entrepreneur or professional, it's tough because you're also a parent. And so, one of them put a hand up and said, but how? I mean, it's, 25 years in, you're able to give this advice. But, right now, it's hard. And, at which point I told her also, I said, it is hard. And there's nobody saying that it's not going to bother you as a parent, that you're choosing to or having to choose to miss annual day. Take time for your mental health, because you cannot beat yourself up at work and then beat yourself up at home and then think you're going to be really good at either.
Absolutely. I also think it's really important for women who are listening to this to remind themselves to choose. When I say choose, it's like this. It's your friend's 50th birthday and it's your nephew's wedding and you have to choose.
Oh, for the birthday!
I'm saying you have to choose one. Nephew might be a favorite nephew and someone you really want to see getting married. Could be possible. What I'm saying is the language we speak to ourselves matters.
Yeah.
If I say, I really wanted to go to my friend's birthday, but I'm having to go for this wedding instead, I'm a victim.
Right.
But if I say, I adore my nephew and I really want to go for his wedding, I think it's important that I be there for him, then I'm making a choice.
Right.
Otherwise, if you really, really want to go for the birthday, then go for the birthday. What's going to happen? The moment we cut off that, we are human, we all get affected by people's opinions of us. We are not saints. But we have to stop overvaluing it. We are so completely subsumed by that opinion of others of us that it comes in the way of our own happiness. We really, really acknowledging that we are human, that opinions matter, harsh words matter, kind words matter, compliments make us feel good, insults make us feel bad. Of course, given all that, we really need to reduce the value of other people's opinions somehow. I have seen it ruin people's lives because everything is being done to be liked. Why? Who cares if 5 people dislike you? You dislike 5 people. It's okay. Not the end of the world to be disliked.
No, I think in fact, in some rooms, it's preferable. It's fine to be inconvenient. It's fine to
Trying to
be,
be in, yeah, absolutely.
it's all right. You're not everybody's cup of tea, and that's all right. As long as you know that you're trying to do, you have great output. I find that in the end, it's worth it. Forget for anybody else, for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
you talked about obviously your parents, but I'd love for you to also, talk about other people in your career who helped you or influenced you or turned around and, given you that leg up or hand to grow.
Oh, huge number of people, huge number of people. I did not, unfortunately, have too many female leaders or female mentors in the early part or even for a large part of my career, but I have worked with, quote unquote, a few good men.
Like I said, shout out to the allies. I'd love for you to name some of them, just because for being that guy.
Oh, absolutely. From Tapas Sen, who made me fall in love with radio. He was the chief programming officer at Radio Mirchi until he retired last year. Calls me his bad penny because he's just been my boss through my life in different jobs. He was always there whenever it was radio. I loved radio. I fell in love with music. I understood music programming. So much from him. Then, of course, we diverged in our understanding of radio and programming, and the sheer respect that we had for each other, that we could agree to disagree. We could agree to do things differently. Sometimes he would say the nicest of things to me, like, you've outgrown me and that's my best gift, and I'd be like, no, I don't think I've outgrown you, but
A
whatever.
wonderful compliment to receive, but also what a lovely gift to get as a mentor as well.
Absolutely. One of the things Tapas has said to me is so, so, so precious. I was going through some confidence crisis, and am I relevant? I've quit radio, I've done this, and am I making a difference anymore? Earlier, I had a Midas touch, and everything I touched would turn to gold. Am I losing it? And sometimes when I sit down, what do I write in my CV? What exactly have I done? And Tapas said, I hope you understand you have built an industry in this country. You are part of the people who've built radio in India. And I was like, that sounds spectacular. I had never thought of it like
Spectacular. And that's why you're here, Riya. So we'll echo Tapas's sentiment on that. Tell me, going forward, taking that same thought forward, we'd love for you to name 2 women that you think are doing an outstanding thing so we can add them to our long list for next year's cohort of Game Changers.
Let me think. That's interesting. There are a lot of women doing some very interesting stuff, but let me think about that. But before that, I would be remiss if I did not mention a few other wonderful people.
Sure.
Sukrit Singh, who was the CEO, CCO at Encompass Events. I really learned ideation from him. He was fantastic. I used to take his ideas and develop them into big presentations and all that. Somebody once said that Sukrit literally comes and throws an idea at you and you do all the work. Why does he get the credit? I said, because he deserves it. Because what I call blank slate creativity, pull an idea out of a hat when there's nothing. I said, anybody can develop it into a 20-slide presentation or make 50 collaterals around it. I said, but that thing that Sukrit does comes up with an idea from nowhere. I want to learn that. Or Nandan Srinath and Prashant Pandey in Mirchi for teaching me business, for not putting me in a little box called creative, but saying, come understand P&L, come understand how the business works, come understand what marketing does, come understand what every idea of yours does to revenue.
The bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic people. Mr. Parigi, who was the early CEO, Mr. AP Parigi, and gave us such brilliant life lessons, which were useful personally and professionally. I mean, I've really worked with some fantastic people. I worked with Swati Bhattacharya, you're talking about women, who was the chief creative officer at FCB Ulka after I started freelancing, and I collaborated with her on a lot of her award-winning campaigns, including Shindur Khala and all that, which won multiple lions and pencils and whatnot. She was a wonderful woman to collaborate with. May Thomas and I were the 2 Spotify podcasting mentors for India when we were teaching young women podcasting. And May is also, she also has her own podcast called Made in India, which is a pun on her own name,
Right.
where she interviews indie bands and indie artists. And she's doing a fantastic job there. You should see her, especially for Game Changers. The kind of artists she has brought into the limelight are really, really exceptional. She definitely is somebody I think who's doing very quiet work. Again, because it's in English, it doesn't have that sort of, deep reach into the Indian hinterland that only Indian languages have.
Right.
But she's doing really good work in terms of highlighting indie artists.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty much all the time you also have, and that we have too. Riya, I think the most interesting thing about getting to know you has been the fact that you have the ability to tell a story, around with words and around words, and, and you're retelling them one syllable at a time. And I'm particularly excited about you changing the game even more, and congratulations on the many mountains you are still to climb, one in particular that I'm going to be watching out for. Thank you for joining us today. It was lovely talking to you and learning from you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was delightful.
This is Raunaq from Hungama. Thank you for tuning in, and stay with us as we meet more women in entertainment who aren't just playing the game, they're changing.
In conversation with some fascinating ladies who've changed the game in the world of video, music, and gaming. Only on Hungama's Women Game Changers podcast.